So I'll start by giving you a little bit of context about what we'll be discussing, and then I'll take a step back and explain a little bit more about myself and my background and how I partner with Hilarity for Charity or HFC. So, this presentation is part of a series that HFC is doing right now, a sort of caregiver road trip series. The idea being that caregiving is a journey. And like any journey, there's background information to be had and things to pack, things that you should know. And so the first workshop in the series was, I think, a week or two ago. And this series will span, I think, 6 or 7 different workshops over the course of the next few weeks. So this is the second in a series. So just sort of keep that in mind. They're doing this series. The theme is caregiver road trip, things you should know, things you should pack. And this is the second in that series. So for more information about this series that HFC is doing, you can go to this website. I'm also going to put in the chat now, and I'll put it in the chat a little bit later too, in case additional people join us. There's a few different websites that I'll mention with different resources. So let me share this now. All right, so this website that you're looking at right now and all of the websites that I'm going to discuss and share are in that chat. And again, if you need anything after this, what I'll do is I'll put my email in the chat as well. You can email me anytime and I'll send all of this to you again. So, as I mentioned, HFC is doing this caregiver road trip series, and this is the second in that series. And they're following this sort of light rubric when it comes to your caregiving journey. So the first workshop that they did, which again was about a week or two ago, was getting a lay of the land. What is dementia? What is Alzheimer's? How to go about a diagnosis? So that was an earlier workshop that they already did. In this workshop, we're going to be talking about some of the resources that might be helpful to you when you're on this journey. So understanding the cost of care, resources for making sure that the house remains safe, and so forth. So I'm going to be going through those in the next, like, less than an hour. I won't take up too much of your all's time. Any questions about that so far before I take a step back and explain a little bit about myself and my background and my relationship with HFC? All right, well then let's dive into it. So as I was telling Valerie briefly, I am with a for-profit organization that provides free services to caregivers who are affiliated with HFC. So all of you are taking care of someone. I did as well for many years. And as you know, when you're caring for someone, there's so much admin involved. You're filling out forms, you're making calls, you're sending emails. So what we do is we provide caregivers with a real human person who makes the calls for you and sends the emails for you and helps fill out the forms for you. And we do all of that for a monthly rate starting at $50 a month, but all of you get Care Co-Pilot services for free because you're associated with Hilarity for Charity. So keep Care Co-Pilot in mind if there ever comes a point where you need help filling out those forms or making those calls. Just reach out on the website and we would be happy to help you for free. I started Care Co-Pilot 3 years ago because I was also a caregiver. So my sister and I cared for both of our aging parents, one right after the other, for a total of 8 years. Our dad died of multiple sclerosis in 2014, and our mom died of Alzheimer's in 2020.
Oh, man.
And it was absolutely brutal. We never found anything or anyone that made that experience any easier. So that's why I started Care Co-Pilot, and that's why I am happy to donate Care Co-Pilot services for free to different caregivers who are affiliated with a few different nonprofits. So that's a little bit of background on myself and Care Co-Pilot. Again, please do reach out if there's any way that we can help. You get it for free because you're a part of HFC. So really free, not like anything weird there. Any questions about that before I get into some of the things that you might need to know that might be helpful on your caregiving journey? Any questions or comments so far? All right. Well, please feel free to interrupt me anytime. You know, it's such a small group. Happy to make this a little more of a conversation. Or if it's been a long day, you can also sit back and enjoy, you know, whatever feels right for you. So if you go to the HFC website and you go to this sort of second section of this caregiver road trip that they have a whole section on different resources that might be helpful in your caregiving journey. So what HFC did was they went and they asked a bunch of caregivers, what are some of the things that you wish you would have known or wish you would have had when you started your caregiving journey? So they asked all these caregivers that, and four things came up. People said that they wanted trusted resources. People wanted an understanding of how much all of this stuff costs. People said that they wanted some kind of safety plan to keep their loved ones safe in the home. And they wish that they would have had some kind of support network as they were going through this. Those are the four things that came up: trusted resources, an understanding of how much things cost, a safety plan, and a support network. So during this conversation, I am going to go through each of those things and arm all of you with a few different practical resources that I think you can really sink your teeth into in those different categories. And I'll keep reminding you as we go along here. So first, trusted resources. You know, the interwebs are vast and there is a lot of information online. There's a lot of information that you can find from friends and family and clinicians. Having gone through this journey myself firsthand and worked with now hundreds of people who have done the same, I fully understand how confusing it can be and how hard it can be to identify resources that actually move the needle and solve real problems. So one thing that I can say based on my experience and the experience I've had with hundreds of families, some of the, in my opinion, just one person's opinion, some of the best resources tend to be the disease-specific websites and nonprofits like HFC. And I'll give you some examples. So the first is one that some of you may have heard of before, the Alzheimer's Association. Now, the Alzheimer's Association is more than just a website with information about Alzheimer's. I have found their 24-hour helpline to be extremely helpful. Now, I actually, earlier this afternoon, called their helpline again today just to make sure before I came and spoke with you that it's actually still helpful. So earlier today, I gave them a call. They picked up right away. I didn't have to spend 5 minutes going through a bunch of annoying prompts. And I asked them, just as an example, I gave them a specific case. I said, oh, I'm taking care of my aunt who has Alzheimer's and I'm looking for help with reduced cost in-home care for her. Can you give me a few resources? And she emailed me back within half an hour with a whole list of different organizations in the zip code that I gave her, of different nonprofits that do grants and things like that. So this helpline is actually helpful. Now, one thing that I'll say is that, like any organization, any helpline, I would imagine that if you call some days, you get some people who are more helpful than others. So you might want to have a little patience and a little grace there. But I can say that I have personally called this helpline multiple times, most recently today, and she was actually helpful. So that's one resource. Let me pause here and see how we're doing so far before I dig into some additional resources. Any questions, comments, shares?
Elise, this would be in the US, right? This helpline.
So you make a good point. I've never called them for resources in Canada, so I don't know definitively if they have resources in Canada or not. So yeah, it might be worth calling and seeing them. There's one more helpline that I wanted to share, and same thing. I don't know how many resources they have in Canada, but one suggestion is if you call and they don't have resources in Canada, they probably know of a Canadian equivalent. Because I would be very surprised if there wasn't a similar nonprofit in Canada that has similar resources. So another helpline that I found to be helpful is the Parkinson's Foundation helpline. Not sure if anyone is taking care of someone with Parkinson's or knows someone who does. But again, this is another helpline that I have called myself multiple times. I called them again today. I found them to be helpful. And again, I didn't have to wait online forever. I didn't have to go through a bunch of annoying prompts. And I also asked her for some information, and the person on the line also emailed me back some specific resources within about an hour. So that's another one to keep in mind. But again, don't know if they have resources in Canada. Closing down the list of disease-specific organizations that might be helpful, I also wanted to bring up the Lewy Body Dementia Association. I've never called their helpline before, but I wanted to share this because if anyone is taking care of anyone with Lewy body, they have one of the most helpful disease symptoms checklists that I've ever seen. It's pretty comprehensive and pretty specific. Let me see if I can zoom in. So it goes through cognitive symptoms, things like difficulty planning, keeping track of sentences, physical symptoms, mood changes. There is some more sort of clinical information towards the end. So I think it's a little bit tough to sometimes get different symptoms trackers in this level of detail. Some of these disease organizations have this kind of breakdown, which I think can be really helpful because, I'm sure that we've all been to the doctor's office. They only have maybe 10, 15 minutes to spend with you. Sometimes they just don't have the time to go through this level of detail. A lot of these disease organizations, nonprofits, have documentation like this. So I wanted to share this just as an example. One other newer resource, this just came out maybe last year or so. It's a website called Roon, Roon. And this is free, or at least it's free for now, might not be free forever. But I like this one because you can choose a specific diagnosis like dementia, and they have different videos with information that's helpful for dementia caregivers. So for example, let me just click on the general one. So let's see. There's one video from a big dementia expert I recognize her, this is Teepa Snow, about general strategy for caregivers when working with someone who is expressing difficult behaviors with dementia. What do I do if someone with dementia is no longer able to handle their finances, but they insist on doing it themselves? Will my loved one with dementia forget who I am? Different things, depending on your journey, you might know the answers to some of these, but if you're like me, sometimes it's a little more digestible to see a short video than reading through lots and lots of content. So I think they have pretty good content. And again, this is free. A lot of the individuals who they have on this website are actual social workers or doctors. So this is not random people on Facebook or TikTok or anything like that. They have real experts on there. So that's another resource that I wanted to share. And then, as always, in general, when you're looking for different resources, especially online, this might be the obvious one, but websites like AARP or the National Institute of Health, not sure what the equivalent is in Canada to the National Institute of Health, but those government websites tend to have the most accurate and most helpful resources as opposed to some of these smaller random websites that might not have government or medical backing. So going back to HFC's road trip here and, things that might be helpful in your caregiving journey, trusted resources. We talked about looking for those disease-specific organizations. A lot of them have helplines or checklists, and Rune is another good one if you prefer videos as opposed to, reading through websites. Any questions about finding and vetting trusted resources before we move on to some of the financial implications and understanding the cost of care? Any questions so far? All right. So, as probably all of us know, if you've been doing this for even a short while, this can get very pricey. Dementia is usually a pretty long haul. It can be something that you and your care partner are in for years. And, whether you're in Canada or in the US, health care will pay for some of it, but there can often be other expenses, supplies, durable medical equipment, getting someone to come into the house and help for a few hours a day. It can get up there. So, as HFC was putting together this road trip and asking caregivers what they wish they knew, a lot of caregivers wish that they better understood the cost of care going into this. Now, I do have a few resources to share. There are a few for those in Canada. You might have to work with me a little bit because some of these I think are going to be US specific. Yes. But they might still be somewhat helpful to get a sense of what's out there. And if you all need something Canadian specific, feel free to reach out to me and my team and I will do some research to find you some things. So, one resource to help identify the cost of care is there's a few different calculators online that you can use in order to have some sense of how much things cost. Now, this is not going to be an apples to apples comparison. All of these are going to be in US dollars. And these particular calculators just don't have Canadian cities. But again, email me after if you would like some help tracking down some Canadian equivalents. And, you might be able to use it as a little bit of a proxy. If you live in a big Canadian city, the prices in a big US city might be somewhat similar. But let's take a step back. And here's where, particularly for the Canadian participants, I'll ask you for a little bit of help. So here in the US, for the most part, one of the largest expenses when it comes to taking care of someone with dementia is the price of what is called in-home care, which means bringing someone into the home to help shower your loved one, bathe your loved one, help them make meals. And for the most part, that's not covered by health insurance. My question for those of you in Canada is it the same system in Canada? Do you have a different setup?
I honestly don't know. Yeah, because my journey is kind of starting.
Gotcha.
I've
Gotcha.
had, I've attended a lot of webinars, but I don't know when you get somebody into your home. I
Mm-hmm.
pay for it yourself as well. Yeah, think so. I don't know.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So yeah, something to consider. The US healthcare system, most people over the age of 65 in the US have a type of healthcare that we call Medicare.
Mm.
And it's kind of like free, government-sponsored healthcare for people over age 65. Everyone opts into it because, it's pretty good healthcare. But unfortunately, Medicare does not pay for in-home care except in very rare circumstances, like if someone falls and they have hip surgery, then Medicare will pay for maybe a couple of weeks of in-home care while someone is recuperating, but that's about it. Also in the US, there's another government-sponsored healthcare system called Medicaid, which is for lower income families. Medicaid will pay for in-home care, but you have to be pretty low income to qualify. And then everyone else is on their own and it's just out of pocket and it can get very pricey. And unfortunately, a lot of US families find themselves between a rock and a hard space, especially middle income families where they might not be low income enough to qualify for Medicaid, which will pay for it, but they're not exactly richy rich. So it's a struggle to pay out of pocket every single day if you need someone to come in every day. So just something to consider. Again, you have Care Co-Pilot services for free, so my team would be happy to help do that research to see if the various healthcare plans that you have in Canada cover the cost of in-home care or not. If they don't, then that could, not to scare you, be a pretty big expense. If you get to the point where your loved one does need help, dressing, bathing, doing different things that you might not have the capacity or the physical strength to do all the time. I know when my sister and I were taking care of our dad, for scale, I'm about 5'6", about 140 pounds. Dad was about 5'10", about 175 pounds. Like there was only so much that we could do to
Yeah,
move him.
for
So
sure.
my mom was tiny. She was only 100 pounds. So that was easy. But, we really did need to bring care into the home pretty quickly because there was only so much physically that we could do. So, again, for those of you in Canada, maybe less relevant, but I want you to see what's possible. And again, you can reach out to Care Co-Pilot to see if there's something similar for Canada. So here in the US, we have some of these calculators where you can put in your zip code. That's my zip code here in New York City. And then I can see how much would help in the home cost per hour. How much would it cost per day, per month, per year? How much would it cost if I want to bring someone into the home versus if I need to move my loved one to a specific type of senior community versus another more skilled type of senior community? These are the types of calculators that exist. This is another one I'll show you just for the sake of example. It's the same information, just presented a little bit differently. This one just has a little slider where you can see how much in US dollars would it cost if I want 10 hours a week of help versus 40 hours a week of help. And then it helps you calculate that cost. So again, not directly relevant for Canada, just sort of showing you all what's possible because there might be some equivalents in Canadian dollars where you can put in your equivalent of zip codes and then, kind of figure out how much this might cost.
I don't know if this helps or not. I had home care for myself and it was $33 an hour.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
So
Yeah,
that's,
private company. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. That's pretty on board with a lot of US cities then.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's something else to keep in mind as you're thinking through the cost of care. One thing that I'll say, specifically for Jenny, just in case Jenny, you're on the line and you're in the US, you don't necessarily have to share, but I will say for you, just in case, it's helpful. One other thing, well, two other things to keep in mind for those who are in the US. One, some states have different special legal rules that you can tap into to get your loved one to qualify for Medicaid, even if they're a little bit higher income. So, for example, in the state of New York, there's a special legal instrument that allows you to move assets around to still qualify for Medicaid, even if your loved one's a little higher income. So that's something that Care Co-Pilot works with families on, is to set up that legal instrument. One other note is that here in the US, hospice will pay for quite a bit in terms of durable medical equipment, in-home care, and more. I don't know what the hospice system in Canada looks like, but here in the US, I can honestly say both of my parents were on hospice during their final years of life. A lot of Care Co-Pilot's clients have been on hospice in their final times of life. 100% of the families who I have spoken with who have had a loved one on hospice have had a good experience, regardless of what state they're in, or what have you. Okay, thanks, Jenny. You say you're in Northern California, so I have something specifically for you that might be relevant and interesting for you. So, in the state of California, there's a special legal instrument. I don't know what it's called in California, but I know it exists. And in New York, it's called a pooled trust, pool like a swimming pool. And so what happens is that you can set up the special legal instrument. And if you're taking care of someone who has too many assets or who's getting too much from Social Security to qualify for Medicaid, you can still use this pooled trust to get them on Medicaid and get your in-home care covered by Medicaid. So that's really quite special because all states do not do this. And as I mentioned, that in-home care can get quite expensive. So this is quite the wild card in your pocket. So just sort of keep that in mind. Keep in mind pooled trust. I'll put this in the chat. And again, you get Care Co-Pilot's services for free. So reach out to Care Co-Pilot or just email me anytime if you'd like a little more information about that, because it can really end up saving you quite a bit of money.
Is that something that Care Co-Pilot would be able to help me set up?
So an attorney has to set it up.
Okay.
So we don't have an attorney on staff, but we do work with attorneys in the larger states like New York and California. So I can definitely send you a short list of some of the attorneys in California who set up the pool trust. Attorneys, one note though, if you do go with the pool trust, is that there's usually a monthly fee to operate the trust, and it's usually a few $100. But, you save a few $100 a day potentially by getting your in-home care covered by Medicaid. So yeah, keep that in mind and happy to talk with you, just sort of walking you through those options. And then someone from my team can email you a short list of attorneys who can tell you more.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah.
If you if we qualify for Medicaid that way, are we limited in who we could use for support, or is it just that we're now getting like financial support for it?
By limited in who you can use, you mean in terms of the in-home care aides who accept Medicaid?
Yes.
Yes. So for the most part, the answer is yes. So there are some in-home care agencies that do not accept Medicaid. You have to pay privately.
Okay.
There are other in-home care agencies that accept Medicaid. Granted, it's a smaller amount. And so you have to go through an in-home care agency that actually accepts the Medicaid.
Mhm.
But in large states like California and New York, there's usually no problem finding someone unless your loved one lives in a very remote part of California. So if they're way out in the country or way out in the suburbs, I do want to be honest with you and warn you, sometimes that can be tough to find a Medicaid aid if they're pretty isolated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know if the Medicaid funds can be used for the adult daycare?
I actually don't. I think so. I know so in New York. I don't know if it's different with California Medicaid.
Mhm.
But if you send me an email and remind me, I'll have the team look that up and report back on that for you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, one more note I can say is that Medicaid will also cover the cost of assisted living. So if you're taking care of someone who ends up needing to move to assisted living, they'll cover the cost of that too. Medicaid will cover the cost of that too.
Okay, great.
Absolutely. All right, that effectively ends the section on understanding the cost of care. The big takeaway here is that when it comes to the cost of care, in-home care or senior community, really that is what I've seen eat up the most of the cost of care. There's little things that come up here and there too, food, clothes, incontinence products, you name it. But actually getting someone into the home to help care or moving someone to a senior community, if you are in a population where you can't get it covered by insurance, that's what really eats up the cost. So yes, please do leverage this free resource that you have for HFC. Leverage my team to help you figure out, what, if anything, you might be able to get covered because it gets really pricey really fast. True story, if my father had lived even one more year, it would have bankrupted me. I was already eating through my personal savings, eating through my 401k. I was eating through everything just to pay for his care. So I don't want to scare people, but I do want to be honest that this can get quite expensive. So definitely ask questions, ask my team questions. so that we can make sure that you know what your options are in terms of getting as much as possible covered. All right, any questions before we move on to home safety? Okay, so the US's National Institute of Health has a pretty handy home safety checklist that I always like to share with folks. Some checklists are a little, they're like too intuitive to be helpful, but this one actually, I think, has some things that I would not have thought of. Like, for example, if you can adjust the temperature of the water in the house so that it's not scalding, so that your loved one does not scald themselves on hot water, that's something that might be helpful. Making sure that you are either taping down the rugs or removing rugs, because rugs often pose a fall risk in the home, something that I wouldn't think of. So there's a few other ones, like making sure that you keep certain medications locked up, because people with dementia can start to get confused about medications. This website is in the chat. So I think that this is a pretty good resource for just making sure that if you're taking care of someone who's still physically living at home, that that home is organized as safely as possible. One other note, and this is kind of a tough one to talk about, admittedly, so bear with me, but I think it's an important one that doesn't necessarily get discussed that often. You know, I've been running Care Copilot for several years now. We've worked with, I've truly lost count of how many families we've worked with. There's a very common theme in what I see when it comes to home safety. Usually what I see is someone with dementia or another diagnosis getting hurt in the home or getting hurt on the road because they're driving or going out the door and wandering. There's usually a disconnect between the preferences of the person who has dementia and the caregiver and sort of what they're willing to play along with. And I can give you some examples. So I'll give you an example from my own experience. So my sister and I did not take the keys away from our mom nearly fast enough. We didn't take the keys away from her because she insisted until the day the Alzheimer's took her voice that there was nothing wrong with her memory. She had no idea who I was, no idea who my sister was. She insisted there was nothing wrong with her memory. She could drive, she could do this, she could do that. And we were in such a state of denial and in such a state of not wanting to upset our mom because we had that kind of relationship that we let her drive way too late. And she ended up getting lost driving to her own home.
Oh,
And the police got involved. Gosh, this was a while ago now, so I'm starting to forget. She drove to a neighbor's house. The neighbor told her where she lived, and the neighbor called the police. So mom got home, but then the police were called and mom was confused. The point is, we really should have just upset mom, put our foot down, and taken the keys away. But we didn't. And so we had this incident. And thank God that my mom did not drive into the next state or drive off the road or whatever the case might be. That's still a hard story to tell to this day. But the point is, I see this all the time, where regardless of if it's your spouse, your sister, your parent, you want to respect their autonomy, you want to respect their preferences, you want to respect their wishes. But when someone's, especially as they start to get into the later stages of dementia, that relationship truly has to change for their safety. They cannot do things that they used to do safely. They cannot have things that they used to have safely. And so I see so many incidences where, you know, that caregiver is trying to hang on and say, oh, but she really doesn't want to give the keys away. Oh, but she really wants to manage her own bills. He really wants to do his own medications. I know this isn't very, like, I don't know, PC or whatever, but I caution people against that dynamic, Because as painful as it is, and I'm saying from experience, that's when I see a lot of issues happen. Trying to, and I respect that, we want our loved one to maintain their dignity and to have some autonomy. But again, that's where I've seen a lot of things happen, prioritizing feelings and prioritizing trying to make sure they get what they want over what needs to happen from a safety perspective. So that was a little bit of a rant. And I know that might have been a lot to take in. So let me pause there and see if there are any feelings, anything anyone wants to share, anything at all. I'll just wait a couple of minutes.
Lisa, did your mom at this stage still have a driver's license, or she
Yeah.
didn't? Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
she did. Because in my mother's case, not to make this about me, but just to sort of complete the story since you asked. So after my dad died in 2014, she deteriorated like that. So at my father's funeral, she delivered a really beautiful eulogy. She looked fabulous. She was completely coherent. It was not 1 month after he died that she fell off a cliff cognitively and never came back.
Wow.
And I'll never forget, about a month after he had died, she kept calling me saying, I haven't talked with your dad recently. Have you heard from him? And he was deceased. She was, again, at the funeral, delivered the eulogy. Like, that's how fast she declined. And so that's why she still had a driver's license, because before that, she was getting confused, definitely early stages of dementia, but she was still lucid enough to drive. She was working part-time, and then she fell off a cliff and it was just all over. Yeah.
So I was just wondering because my husband lost his driver's license while he went for one test, and they called him back for a second one, and he said, I don't want to do it. I'll just give my driver's license in. He's 76 now. So I'm wondering whether I should start putting the keys in my bag, because will he at some stage maybe forget that he doesn't have a driver's license? He's very content about it. He's not sort of like upset or aggressive or anything. But I'm wondering now about what you say. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I'm a stranger who's never met your husband, and I have no idea how his deterioration is playing out. One thing that I will say, though, and I don't have a medical background, so you'll have to take this with a grain of salt. I can only say this based on all of the patients I personally have seen and what I've seen in my own family, because everyone in my family had Alzheimer's. Just everyone died of Alzheimer's. Um, it seems that specifically for Alzheimer's, perhaps not for other forms of dementia, but specifically for Alzheimer's, I've seen a lot of patients go through an aggressive phase out of nowhere. So my mom, my little 100-pound mom, was always so sweet, so soft-spoken, hated arguing with people. One of those people where you would ask her to speak up and she would just say the same thing at the same volume, like would never raise her voice. She got so aggressive and would literally try and physically fight me at times. It was the disease. It wasn't her. So, I don't know what your husband's diagnosis is. He could have Lewy body or frontotemporal. It could manifest differently. Oh yeah, what
Yes,
was that?
he has Alzheimer's.
Okay. So, again, one person's opinion, one person's perspective, but I have seen some people go through an aggressive phase. So if now he's at the phase where you can start hiding keys or doing different things, now might be the opportunity. Because if you wait until the aggressive phase, perhaps not, it could be a bit more of a fight then. Other thoughts when it comes to home safety? All right.
Elise, you mentioned the rugs are kind of dangerous. I was wondering, like my parents' home has not been remodeled for many, many years, and I think we
Mhm.
need to.
Yeah.
It has carpet everywhere. So I was just wondering, like, should we just replace it again with carpet or and there's stairs also. I should mention that. And my dad is also, he broke his hip and he broke his knee. Um,
Oh, okay.
and my
Okay.
mom also has had falls in the past where she broke her pinky.
Okay.
So I was just thinking, I think it does need to be replaced, but I'm just not sure like with what.
Yeah. So, and it's a little hard for me without like seeing the home and again, just one person's opinion. But
Mhm.
if you've already got the carpet, I would think that the carpet would actually be safer than any kind of hardwood or laminate or something that's harder in case they do fall.
Yeah.
That said, if there's stairs and whatnot, there might be a different type of renovation or remodeling that might need to happen.
Hmm.
One thing that I'll say, I don't know if it's different in the state of California because I'm better with some states than with others for Medicaid. But if you end up doing the pooled trust or something else to get one or both parents on Medicaid, in some states like New York and New Jersey, Medicaid will cover the cost of some home remodels for safety.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Example, Medicaid will cover the cost of installing a grab bar in the shower so they don't fall in the shower
Hmm.
or a wheelchair ramp. Again, I don't know, I don't want to get your hopes up too much because I don't know California Medicaid that well. But again, if you reach out to Care Copilot, that's something that our team would be happy to research and confirm to at least figure that out before you spend any money on anything. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah,
Great. Thank you.
absolutely. Other questions before we go to the last section, which will be the shortest section, which is a support network. Okay, so this is another one that's like maybe a little tough to talk about, think about, but I'll say the following. Again, I've worked with lots of caregivers. I'm on the phone with them all day, every day. Getting support for this type of experience can make a world of a difference. I think that Valerie and I were talking through that, just briefly before the call started. And by support, I mean support from both the clinical team, the doctors, the nurses, the social workers, and your personal support network, family, friends, you name it. There's not really a formula to that, practically. I can share a few things that I found, again, based on speaking with a lot of different people. One thing that I found is that there seems to be a dynamic where some of the most value adding and measurable support comes from very unexpected sources. I cannot tell you how many times I've worked with a pair of siblings where one sibling is doing everything, the other siblings are doing little to nothing, but a random neighbor or cousin is really coming through in a big way, providing time, providing money, what have you. I can't tell you how many times I've been on the phone with someone and the main primary doctor or the main neurologist is just completely checked out, not telling them what they need to know. But the social worker the social worker at the hospital when they get admitted, ends up being insanely helpful. So I might not be sharing anything that some of you have not already experienced, but the main thing that I want to say is I think it's important to keep an open mind as you go through this journey about who might be helpful and who might not be, because I find that a lot of caregivers get surprised. They get surprised when someone who they thought they could really rely on does not come through. They get surprised when someone who they did not even know that well all of a sudden shows up in a really big way. Otherwise, again, I don't think there's really any formula to this. I've seen people rely on their existing communities like their church or their mosque or their synagogue or their coworkers. Some people really like Facebook groups. Some people really like meetup groups. At a high level, you'll do what's right for you and what makes sense for you. But when it comes to support, the one thing that I really want to impress upon you all is to keep an open mind for who might be helpful and who might not be. And just kind of be prepared for that because I've seen so many caregivers, frankly, get their heart broken by the sibling who's not helping or the spouse who's not helping, and be pleasantly surprised when a friend from middle school just comes through. So that's what I wanted to share on that point. With that, that is really it. To recap, caregiving is a journey. HFC put together this whole website with different things to know on the caregiving journey. And I guess they'll be doing 7 different workshops, one for each of these sections in the caregiving journey. Things like resources and legal stuff, you name it. This is just one presentation in a series. I am with, let me put this up again, Care Copilot. You get Care Copilot services for free, for free. So please do reach out to the team and I, if there's anything that we can help you with. And yeah, like I said, I've been through this before as well. Definitely feel for anyone who's still going through it right now. That's why I do what I do. So yeah, my team and I and HFC are here for you. I really believe in HFC as an organization. They're a great nonprofit. Is there
Thank you.
anything else that you all want to share, talk about, ask questions about? I'm certainly an open book, and my time is yours. We've got about 10 minutes left.
Is there a company like Care Copilot in Canada?
That's a good question. I don't know offhand, but I think I know someone who might know. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second and make a note to reach out to him tomorrow. And for you, Valerie, that was you who just asked that, right?
Yes.
If you put your email in the chat, you can send it to, there's an option where you can send it to just me. And I'll send you an email later this week, either way, if there is something in Canada or not, just to kind of close the loop there.
Okay.
Other questions?
I was wondering if you help with like vetting people to be caregivers, like either in home or I have this benefit through work called Bright Horizons where I can get caregivers like either in the home or I can like have them go to the library with my mom or do other things.
Yeah.
Um, but I was just like, I called an adult, I went to an open house for an adult daycare center. And just the idea of like dropping my mom off was like really weird to me. And they're like, oh yeah, it's like preschool. Like, I don't know, like I just don't ever leave her somewhere, right? Like I go with her to the library and I'm like with her. And so just that idea was very foreign to me. So I guess I was just wondering like how much can I trust them and what should I do to see if they're like, yeah, if they're trustworthy or if I can feel comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll kind of tease through a few different things that you brought up there. So one is the question of these adult day centers, and just to fill in our Canadian counterparts as well, because I don't know if Canada has this day center model, but here in the US, we have these organizations called adult day centers. Sometimes they're called older adult centers. And it's kind of like a like preschool. I feel like that sounds a little pejorative, but I think it's the most clear analogy. And it's for older adults. And older adults can go there and they can spend the day. It's either free or very low cost, like maybe 20 US dollars a day, something like that. Some of them provide transportation. Oh yeah, Elise, you have your hand up. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, we have it here as well.
Okay, great. Yeah. Um, and so, Jenny brings up the question of how it feels a little foreign to kind of drop someone off somewhere and how can you trust that organization? Um, so one, I might suggest spending a few hours at the adult day center with them, Jenny, if you have a little concern so that you can kind of vet it, make sure that it smells okay, make sure that it looks clean. Sometimes they'll let you go and like spend a few hours with your loved one together there so that you can kind of get a vibe check for it. One other note is that we have Care Copilot has had some clients in California, mostly in the Bay Area.
Mhm.
Not sure if you're there in that area.
I am.
Oh, okay, great.
Yay.
Um, So then it's been a while since someone's asked for adult day centers, but I know that we've had some clients who have gone to day centers. So if you reach out to my team, happy to go through our list of day centers that have been said to be a little bit more of a thumbs up in terms of quality. And then otherwise, it's a it's a decision that you don't even necessarily need to commit to.
Hmm.
You can try it out for a day, a week. If they don't like it, there's so many in the Bay Area, you've got lots of different options. So that's one. Number two, you also, I think we're asking about vetting someone to come into the home, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is something that we do work with clients on all the time, and it looks different by client. So some of Care Copilot's clients, they just kind of want a list of questions that they should be asking an in-home care aide before they allow someone to come into the home. So, and we do that. That's easy. We have like a list of questions that we just email folks, and it has questions usually with background like language support. Sometimes religion can be important. If you come from a conservative religious family, sometimes diet really comes into play and allergies. Recently, someone was allergic to peanuts, and so that was a thing. Um, Pets can be a surprisingly big one. Some in-home care aides are just not comfortable with pets fundamentally. So sometimes you'll have to ask about pets and whether or not someone's comfortable with pets. Some in-home care aides with some agencies will not lift a patient.
Hmm.
That's another one that comes up. So seeing someone who's willing to lift. So I'm forgetting the whole list right now, but my company can certainly send that to you. Again, all of this is free. And then other than that, if you ever want to have like a more detailed conversation about your parents and what they're looking for, we do that with clients as well to really dig into some things that make sense for the family. So for example, we worked with one client. She has two moms. One of her moms started needing care. And so obviously she wanted an aide who was just, a little more comfortable with LGBTQ families and like things like that,
Hmm.
you might want to ask as well, depending on what the situation is.
Okay.
So
Do
yeah,
you know?
sorry, no one size fits all option. I think that's more of we have a short list of questions we can send you, and we can
Hmm.
help you cultivate more questions from there if you ever want to reach out. No rush.
Okay. And do people with Alzheimer's and dementia, like, is it possible? I feel like it's possible. Like they'll be okay going to the day center for a while, and that of all of a sudden they're just like not into it anymore, and so you'll have to like then look into home care.
Yeah, so, it depends on how far the disease has progressed.
Hmm.
Also, some day centers will just straight up tell you, look, your loved one is just too progressed in the disease. They're
Mm.
a wander risk. It really would not be safe for them here during the day, because they might just wander out the door when our staff's back is turned preparing lunch. So sometimes the adult day centers will just let you know. And also one note to clarify, are you talking about the day centers where the loved one just goes for the day and they come back home at night?
Yes.
Or are you, okay, yeah. So yeah, a lot of them will just tell you like, yeah, they seem like they could be a good fit or a not good fit. Some of the better day centers also have usually a social worker or a
Hmm.
community health worker on staff that kind of keeps an eye on the regular visitors and will coordinate with the family if they ID anything.
Hmm.
That's not necessarily all adult day centers, though.
Okay. I don't have kids, but I really do feel nervous, like I'm if as if I had a kid and dropping them off at preschool.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, gosh, it is only Monday, and I've already gotten two emails from two different daughters. One's caring for her mom, one's caring for her dad, and they both moved their parents into a assisted living community.
Mhm.
And they both emailed me with the same concern. My mom is not participating in activities. My dad's not participating in activities. I really wish that he or she would talk to more people and do this.
Mhm.
It's something that comes up often,
Mhm.
and I always share the same things. One is if your loved one was a little bit more reserved and less social throughout their whole life up until now, I would suggest setting the expectation, frankly, a little low because odds are good that they're not necessarily going to become a social butterfly, in this season of life. Like what you see is kind of what you get there.
Yeah.
And then the other piece is, and again, this is the tougher piece. Sometimes, and again, I know this is so tough because I've been there myself. Sometimes it's important to do whatever you can to let go of the like enjoyment piece and focus more on the safety component. Because, sometimes as the disease progresses, it's truly just unsafe for them to live at home and they have to move into some kind of senior community. And
Mm-hmm.
so as long as they're safe, that's the key thing.
Mm-hmm.
And enjoying different activities is sort of the icing on the cake, but sometimes that happens, sometimes that doesn't. And I get it, like I said, I've gone through this before. You want your parents to be like happy and smiling and enjoying this phase of life, or your spouse or whoever it might be. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. But if they are safe and if they're
Mm-hmm.
clean, that's the win.
Yeah.
But I get it. I
Yeah.
really get it.
It's good to keep it in perspective. And also, like the clean part, that is actually really a challenge for me, just getting her to shower. I mean, I have to do it for her, but so yes.
Yeah, yeah. Showering, bathing can be a challenge through, different stages of the disease. Yeah, I see that very commonly as well.
Mm.
We're already a little over time, but I am still happy to stay on for a few minutes if there are different questions. While you all think, I'm going to make sure that I take down these email addresses and I will let you two know they're in Canada. If I do, there's one company that I think might do something similar to Care Copilot, but I don't want to get you all's hopes up. So I will email you back later this week and let you know for sure.
Thanks. This has been really good. Thank you.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I mean, this is really my life's work. If I can even leave you with one thing to make this experience easier than mine was, for me and my sister Lisa, then I've won. And please do reach out. I have a full team, happy to help in any way that we can.
Mhm.
Much, Elise.
Thank you
All
so much.
right. You all have a fantastic evening. Hang in there. I know that this is a journey. And again, reach out anytime, and I'll email the two of you in Canada later this week.